I could still feel his fingers, cold and lifeless, wrapped in mine. His breathing had slowed. Monitors beeped softly as if whispering that the end was near. The sterile scent of the hospital, the fluorescent lights, the stillness, it all felt like a cruel joke. My husband, my partner of 12 years, was dying, and I had just kissed his forehead for what I believed would be the last time. "Goodbye, David," I whispered, my lips trembling against his skin. I stood up, wiped the tears from my cheek, and turned away. My chest ached like something was clawing from the inside. Each step toward the door felt like betrayal. But I had to leave. I needed air. I needed to breathe without the smell of antiseptic choking me. I needed to scream, but quietly, because no one screams in a hospital. You just suffer in silence. I walked out of the ICU with my arms folded tightly across my chest, trying to hold myself together. The hallway was empty, just a long tunnel of linoleum and silence. But then I heard it. A voice, then another. Laughter. Muffled, but unmistakable. 2 nurses stood at the end of the hallway, not seeing me. They were standing near the nurses' station, half hidden by the corner. I slowed my pace, not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because something about their tones stopped me. It wasn't grief, it wasn't compassion. "I can't believe he pulled it off," one of them said, chuckling. "Right?" The other one replied, "She looked so heartbroken. Poor thing has no clue." I froze, my heart skipped. What did she mean by pulled it off? Who were they talking about? I wasn't sure, but something about the phrase, "she looks so heartbroken," made my skin crawl. They were talking about someone who had just been fooled, lied to, betrayed. I slowly leaned closer, staying hidden behind the corner. "She thinks he's dying," the first nurse said, "but he's not even on life support. It's just sedation for the surgery. He'll be up in a couple days." Laughter again. "She doesn't know?" Apparently not. He made the doctor swear not to tell her, said it was part of his plan. I felt my knees weaken, my breath caught in my throat. "He's not dying?" My hands started shaking. I blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of the words I'd just heard. Was this some sick misunderstanding? Or were they really talking about my husband? I stepped back, then leaned forward again, hoping, desperately praying that I'd misheard. Then the second nurse added one more sentence that shattered the last piece of my denial. "She's been staying by his bedside for 3 days straight, pregnant too." He really played the sympathy card. I almost dropped to the floor. There it was. Pregnant. Sympathy card. They were talking about me, about David, about us. And suddenly, it all started to make a twisted kind of sense. The way he held my hand with guilt, not love. The way he insisted I take breaks, leave the room, take care of the baby. How he never let me speak to the doctors directly. How all his medical files seemed conveniently inaccessible. The mysterious diagnosis that had never been explained to me in full. Oh my God. My husband was faking his death. I staggered back from the corner, heart pounding, pulse in my ears like a war drum. I felt like I was going to throw up. I looked down at my belly, gently rounded under my coat. 7 months pregnant. I had stood by that man, loved him, fought with the insurance company for every dollar of his treatment, wept at night wondering how I'd raise our child without him. And he was faking it? Why? Why would he do this to me? I rushed to the nearest bench in the hallway, sat down, and tried to breathe. But the oxygen refused to come. My vision blurred. A nurse passed by and gave me a strange look, but I turned away. I wasn't ready to confront anyone. Not yet. I needed to think. What kind of person does this? What kind of man pretends to be dying while his pregnant wife weeps over his bed? Unless there was more to it. Unless this wasn't just a prank or a lie. Maybe it was an escape or a cover-up. Something darker. Something dangerous. I thought about the past few months, the secret phone calls, the late-night work emergencies, the sudden hospital visit, the rushed diagnosis, the lack of detail. I thought I was too overwhelmed with the pregnancy to notice. I thought grief had clouded my judgment. But no, it wasn't grief. It was trust. Blind, absolute trust. And he shattered it. I gripped the edge of the bench so tightly that my knuckles turned white. If David was faking this, I had to know why. I had to find out everything. I had to protect myself and my baby. I stood up, wiped my tears away with the sleeve of my coat, and started walking. This time, not toward the exit, but back toward his room. I wasn't saying goodbye anymore. I was saying hello to the truth. My name is Claire Evans. I'm 32 years old. I live in a quiet suburb just outside of Boston, where the streets are lined with maple trees, and people wave at each other from their porches like something out of a Hallmark movie. I used to think I had it all. The house, the husband, the career, and now, a baby on the way. I'm a freelance graphic designer, or at least I used to be before pregnancy fatigue hit me like a truck. For the last 2 months, I've mostly been at home, dealing with swollen feet, weird cravings, and the kind of exhaustion they don't warn you about in baby books. David, my husband, insisted I stop working. "You're growing a whole human," he said. "That's your full-time job now." It sounded sweet at the time. We met 11 years ago at a summer wedding. He was the best man. I was the maid of honor. We danced under fairy lights, barefoot in the grass, champagne in our hands. By the end of the night, I'd given him my number. 2 years later, I gave him my hand in marriage. David worked in finance. Not flashy Wall Street money, but a steady position at a mid-sized firm downtown. He wore suits to work, carried a leather briefcase, and always smelled faintly like cologne and coffee. He was calm, organized, confident. The kind of man you trust instantly. And I did. He liked planning things down to the last detail. Our vacations, our grocery lists, our retirement savings. Sometimes it was charming, sometimes it was suffocating. But I told myself that's what made him reliable. That's what made him a good husband. He didn't raise his voice. He never hit me. He brought me soup when I was sick and rubbed my feet when they were sore. He texted me when he'd be late, and he never forgot anniversaries. On paper, he was perfect. So when he collapsed one morning in the kitchen, just dropped the coffee pot and clutched his chest like someone pressed a pause button on his life, I didn't question anything. The diagnosis came fast. Something about his heart. Rare, aggressive, terminal. The doctor used words like advanced and unstable. David sat beside me, squeezing my hand. "It's okay," he said. "I'll fight, but you have to be strong, Claire, for the baby." And just like that, everything in our lives shifted. Hospital visits, specialist consultations, medical bills. I watched my healthy, strong husband turn pale and weak in a matter of weeks, or so I thought. He kept me away from the details, insisted he didn't want me stressed. He said he had it under control, that I just needed to focus on staying calm, on keeping the baby safe. I let him handle everything. I trusted him like I always had. Because I loved him. We'd waited so long for this baby. After 3 years of negative pregnancy tests, 1 miscarriage, and 1 failed round of IVF, I had started to give up. Then, just as we were about to stop trying, it happened. Naturally, a miracle. That's what David called it. A gift from God. He'd cried when we saw the heartbeat on the ultrasound screen. I did too. We painted the nursery together. Yellow because we wanted the gender to be a surprise. He assembled the crib with the same focus he gave to balancing budgets. Every tiny onesie we folded felt like a promise. A future. A life. So when he said he was dying, I didn't doubt. I broke. But I didn't doubt. I remember the day he was admitted to the hospital. It was raining, just a light drizzle, but enough to make the sidewalks slick. I held his hand as they wheeled him into his room. I brought books, headphones, his favorite blanket from the couch. I camped beside his bed, sleeping in a chair, rubbing my belly at night and whispering to the baby, "Daddy's right here. He's so brave." I thought we were going through the hardest thing a couple could face. Now I know I was the only one going through it. Looking back, there were signs. Little things I brushed off, like how the doctor never looked me in the eye. How David always spoke for both of us in appointments. How I never saw the actual medical files. I was too emotionally wrecked to notice, too overwhelmed to ask the right questions. Because that's the thing about being a pregnant woman in crisis. Everyone tells you to rest, to breathe, to not worry. No one tells you to investigate. No one prepares you for betrayal. I come from a modest family. My mom raised me alone. She worked 2 jobs and taught me how to be strong, independent. But when I met David, I let my guard down. He made life feel easy, stable, safe. I thought we were building something solid, but now I see. I was building on sand. It's a special kind of heartbreak when the person you love the most turns out to be a stranger, a liar, a manipulator, and I was carrying his child. As I sat there outside the ICU trying to process what I had overheard, something shifted inside me. The woman who walked into that hospital room was broken, terrified, pregnant, and clinging to hope. But the woman who sat in that hallway, She was waking up. I wasn't just some fragile, helpless wife waiting for the end. I was more than a bystander to a tragedy. I was part of a story I didn't choose, but I could rewrite it. I just didn't know how deep the lies went yet, or what kind of darkness I was about to uncover. But one thing was already clear. I had to stop mourning a man who wasn't even dead. And I had to start finding out who he really was. The hospital was supposed to be a place of healing, a sanctuary where science meets compassion. But to me, it had become a place of shadows, a place where truth was kept in IV bags and lies were dressed in scrubs, where my husband, David, lay in a room surrounded by machines that hummed quietly like accomplices to a crime I hadn't yet fully uncovered. Northview Medical Center stood tall at the edge of the city, a modern structure with glass-paneled walls that reflected the clouds above like they were trying to escape. It was sleek, expensive-looking, the kind of place where every hallway smelled of disinfectant and lavender-scented hand sanitizer. But beneath the shiny surface, I could feel something else. Secrecy. It started in the private wing where David was admitted, Room 4B, Intensive Observation Unit. That section wasn't accessible without a special access card. At first, I thought it was standard protocol for critical patients. But after hearing the nurses laugh about my so-called dying husband, the locked doors didn't feel so reassuring anymore. Every time I entered that room, I noticed how quiet it was. Not peaceful, but unnatural. As if sound didn't want to stay there. The lights were dimmed low even during the day, and the windows were always shut. There were no visitors except me. No flowers, no cards. David said he wanted it that way. "I don't want people seeing me like this," he'd whispered, his voice weak, raspy. "Just you, Claire. Only you." I had thought it was touching. Now it sounded more like control. And then there were the doctors. Especially one, Dr. Marcus Ellison. A man in his late 40s, neatly groomed, always wearing a pressed lab coat and a pair of thick glasses that made him look more like a professor than a physician. He never smiled. He always spoke in riddles. "His condition is progressing as expected," he'd told me every time I asked for specifics. "Just be here for him. He's in good hands." Good hands. I remembered the way his eyes darted to the side whenever I asked for test results. How he insisted I didn't need to see the scans. "Too distressing," he'd said. "Not good for the baby." He always said that. Not good for the baby, like it was his mantra, or his shield. And me? I listened. Because when you're 7 months pregnant and the father of your child is supposedly dying, you want to believe the people in charge. You cling to their words like lifeboats. Now I realize those lifeboats were filled with holes. The hospital cafeteria became my second home. A place I visited between emotional breakdowns and sleepless nights in David's room. I sat at the same corner table near the window, sipping lukewarm chamomile tea because caffeine was off limits. Other families would come and go. Crying mothers, quiet fathers, kids holding balloons. Everyone was living their own private war. But none of them knew what I knew. None of them had overheard nurses laughing about a lie so big it could shatter a life. I started watching more closely. I noticed how the nurses who cared for David never made eye contact with me, how their smiles were forced, rehearsed. I caught one of them, Lucy, typing something into David's file and quickly closing the screen when I walked by. "Just updating medication schedules," she said. Medication for what? Was he even taking real drugs? I peeked into his chart once when she left it open by mistake. It was filled with terms I didn't recognize, but one thing jumped out at me: non-terminal status. My heart nearly stopped. Why hadn't anyone told me? The deeper I looked, the stranger it got. David's hospital room wasn't just private. It was discreetly guarded. A uniformed security guard sat near the entrance to the hallway every evening, not in plain sight, just far enough to go unnoticed unless you were paying attention. Then there was the billing department. I got a call from them 2 weeks prior. They asked to confirm payment details for an elective procedure. I was confused. I told them my husband was receiving emergency care. The woman on the phone stammered, apologized, said it must have been a mistake, but now I wasn't so sure. What kind of elective procedure required faking your own death? The hospital, once a place where I cried quietly beside a beeping monitor, had become a maze of questions. A stage with every staff member playing a role, every hallway a backdrop to a drama far bigger than just me. I began writing things down: times, names, comments. I created a notebook on my phone under the fake title, Prenatal Checklist, so no one would suspect. In it, I tracked every nurse who entered David's room, every medication logged, every interaction with Dr. Ellison. I was no longer just a grieving wife. I was a detective. But there was still one room I hadn't entered. Dr. Ellison's office. It was on the third floor behind a frosted glass door with a silver nameplate. I had walked past it a dozen times, always too afraid to go in. But something told me that was where the real answers were. I needed access. I needed proof. I decided I would wait, stake it out, and while I waited, I replayed every moment with David over the last 2 weeks. His sudden bursts of emotion, his final words, his insistence that I avoid talking to the nurses or asking questions. It was all manipulation. And the hospital? It was his stage. I looked up at the polished ceilings, the long fluorescent lights above me humming like dull alarm bells. Northview wasn't a place of healing. It was the perfect cover for betrayal. If someone had asked me a year ago who David Evans was, I would have said he was the kind of man every woman dreams of marrying. He was smart, calm, and responsible. He always paid the bills on time, remembered to check the smoke detectors every 6 months, and made sure our fridge was never out of oat milk because he knew I preferred it. He held doors open for old women, tipped generously, and once adopted a stray kitten from a rainy sidewalk. But behind that polished image was someone else, someone I didn't see, or maybe didn't want to see. David was good, too polished, too in control. It's funny how the same traits you admire in someone early on are the ones that later feel like warnings you ignored. David didn't just like order, he required it. He didn't just value routine, he demanded it. And when things didn't go his way, he didn't yell or slam doors. No, he got quiet, calculating. He'd find a way to turn the situation around so subtly, you didn't even realize he was pulling the strings. That's how manipulators work, with silence, with strategy. And David? He was a master. I started to see it when I got pregnant. At first he was supportive, gentle. He'd kiss my belly every night before bed, but there were rules, always his rules. No prenatal yoga, it's not safe. No solo grocery runs, it's too stressful. No talking to your mother, she always upsets you. I told myself he was just being protective, caring. But little by little, my world shrank. Then came the financial control. David took over all the bank accounts when I left work. So you don't have to worry, he said. Let me handle everything. He canceled one of my credit cards, by mistake, changed the passwords to our savings account for security reasons. Told me to stop shopping online unless he approved the orders first. I thought it was temporary. I was pregnant, hormonal, tired. I didn't fight it. I let him lead. But now I see the pattern. Control disguised as care. Power masked as love. And when he told me he was dying, that was his ultimate move, the checkmate. Because how do you argue with someone who's supposedly facing death? How do you ask questions when the man you love is wasting away before your eyes? How do you accuse him of lying when you're too busy holding his hand through a staged goodbye? David played the part of the dying husband so well, it deserved an Oscar. The pale skin, a result of fasting. The weakness, he timed his collapses to avoid suspicion. The doctors, complicit or controlled. He even shaved patches of his hair to mimic chemotherapy fallout. I found clumps in the sink one morning and cried for 2 hours. But the David behind the performance was someone darker. Cunning, secretive, cold. And I should have known, because David had secrets long before this. He had another phone. I'd seen it once by accident, tucked in the glove box of his car under a pile of receipts. It was sleek, newer than the one he carried with him. I asked him about it. He said it was for work. Strictly confidential, he told me. I can't even bring it in the house. I believed him. Of course I did. Because that's what trust does. It blinds you. But now I knew that phone wasn't for work. It was for her. Yes, her. Her name is Kayla. I found that out 2 days after I overheard the nurses. She was listed as an emergency contact on one of the hospital forums. I saw it when Lucy the nurse left a clipboard on the counter. Kayla Monroe. The name didn't mean anything at first, but I Googled it, and what popped up made my blood run cold. She was 26, blonde, gorgeous, a fitness model, of course, hundreds of Instagram followers, tons of bikini pics and quotes about manifesting the life you deserve. She was also tagged in photos taken in Puerto Rico last summer, the exact week David said he was on a work retreat. The puzzle pieces snapped into place. David wasn't dying, he was disappearing. Running away from me, from fatherhood, from the mortgage, from everything that wasn't shiny or young or exciting anymore. And he was doing it in the most dramatic way possible, by staging his own death. Who does that? Who looks into their pregnant wife's eyes and says, "I'm dying, but don't worry, I'll always be with you," while planning a secret life with someone else? David Evans, apparently. And it wasn't just an affair, it was an exit strategy. He had taken out a new life insurance policy months ago, just before his diagnosis. $1 million policy. Beneficiary? Not me. Kayla Monroe. I found the documents in a folder on his old laptop labeled insurance/legal. The password? My birthday. The irony was sickening, and now I knew why he was in that hospital room. Not to die, but to disappear, to create a paper trail, to generate sympathy, to vanish from one life and slip into another without questions, without consequences. Only I found out, too soon, too loud. And now the man I thought I knew, my husband, my partner, my future, was the villain in my story. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a con man. He used my love, my pregnancy, my vulnerability to cover his tracks. He faked a terminal illness, he orchestrated a false death, and he almost got away with it. Almost. Because now the woman he thought was broken, she was about to fight back. They say truth has a funny way of coming out, whether you're ready or not. And when it does, it doesn't whisper. It screams. 2 days after I discovered everything, David's fake diagnosis, his affair with Kayla, and the life insurance policy he took out without my knowledge, I stopped waiting for someone else to tell me what was going on. I stopped crying in empty hospital corridors. I stopped hoping it was all a misunderstanding. I was done playing the grieving wife. I was ready to make it public. The perfect moment arrived unexpectedly. Northview Medical Center was hosting its annual Donor Gala, a fundraising event held in the hospital's grand atrium, a black-tie evening filled with champagne, string quartets, and very wealthy people patting themselves on the back. It was also the kind of place David loved. He thrived in rooms like that, controlled, polished, full of people who thought success was the same as goodness. Dr. Marcus Ellison was scheduled to give a speech. His face was printed on the back of the invitation cards. David, of course, had once told me he wouldn't be attending. Too weak, he claimed. Might not make it through the week. Now I knew he had other plans. That night, I put on a dress that still fit my 7-month bump, did my makeup like armor, and walked into that glittering hall like a woman on a mission. No one stopped me. Pregnant women don't look dangerous. They look like they need to sit down and drink water. I spotted him almost instantly. He wasn't in a hospital bed. He wasn't pale or fragile or surrounded by tubes. He was in a black tuxedo, smiling, laughing, sipping champagne, standing next to Kayla. My breath hitched, my vision blurred for half a second, but I didn't faint. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recording app, and hit play on the clip I'd saved, the one I recorded in the hallway, where the nurses joked about how David had pulled it off. The one where they said, I had no clue. Then I walked toward the stage. Dr. Ellison was mid-sentence, thanking the donors for their generosity, when I climbed the steps behind him. The audience noticed me right away. A pregnant woman in a cocktail dress interrupting a formal gala. Heads turned, cameras rose, whispers rippled through the crowd. Dr. Ellison turned, startled. "Ma'am, you can't," I raised my voice. "My name is Claire Evans," I said. "I'm 7 months pregnant, and I've been told for weeks that my husband was dying in this hospital." The room fell into complete silence. "He's not dying," I continued. "He never was. He's been lying, to me, to you, to this entire facility." People gasped. I could see David now, frozen near the back of the room, his glass still raised midair. Kayla stepped back instinctively. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. "He staged a terminal illness to disappear," I said louder now, turning slowly to make sure everyone heard me. "To avoid fatherhood, to commit fraud, to fake his death for an insurance payout." I pressed play on the recording. The nurses' voices echoed through the speaker. Laughter. She looked so heartbroken. "She doesn't know." Sympathy card. Some people covered their mouths, others stared at David. He turned pale, really pale this time, and started moving toward the exit. But it was too late. All eyes were on him. Phones were already filming. I walked down the steps slowly, like it was a wedding aisle in reverse. I approached him. He whispered, "Claire, please, let's talk about this." I slapped him, not out of anger, but to wake him up, to remind him that I was no longer the woman he left sobbing in a hospital chair. "You lied," I said, just loud enough for the people around us to hear. To me, to our baby, to everyone. Security stepped in then, but not to escort me. They surrounded him. A representative from the hospital board, an older woman with silver hair and a pearl necklace, approached me. "Mrs. Evans," she said quietly, "we had no idea. We'll be investigating this immediately." "Start with Dr. Ellison," I replied coldly. He knew. The doctor was already being questioned by 2 board members, their voices low but intense. Kayla tried to sneak away, but a reporter caught up with her. "Did you know he was faking his death?" they asked. She said nothing, just ran. "And David?" He was finally silent. Not the silence of a man in control, but the silence of someone who's just been exposed. He was escorted out of the gala, flanked by security, humiliated. I walked away from that glittering hall, my heels clicking against the marble floor like punctuation marks on a sentence I had rewritten. People clapped. I didn't need applause. I needed justice. But for the first time in weeks, I felt powerful. And that power? It came from truth. The public unraveling wasn't just his downfall, it was my beginning. They don't tell you what happens after you expose the biggest lie of your life. They don't tell you about the silence. Not the kind in a hospital room or a hallway filled with secrets, but the silence in your own home, when you close the door behind you and realize it's just you now. No more pretending. No more distractions. No more delusions of love or family or forever. Just truth and pain. After the gala, everything moved fast. The hospital launched an internal investigation. Dr. Ellison was put on administrative leave, pending a full review. David was detained by police for questioning about insurance fraud, and news outlets had already picked up the story by the next morning. But none of that brought me peace. It brought noise, headlines, texts from old friends I hadn't heard from in years, people who suddenly cared because I was now interesting. Some offered support, others asked for interviews. I turned my phone off. I didn't want the world's sympathy. I wanted a moment to fall apart in private. And so I did. The next night, I locked myself in the nursery. The yellow walls that once felt warm and full of hope now looked faded and hollow. The crib was still unfinished. David had started assembling it the week before he got too weak. His tools were still scattered across the floor. There was a teddy bear sitting on the dresser, still wearing its tag. I sat down on the floor beside the crib and let the weight of it all finally hit me. I screamed. Not a polite sob, not a graceful tear down the cheek. A full-body, soul-ripping scream. My baby kicked, and then I cried harder. "I'm sorry," I whispered to my stomach. "I'm so sorry you have to be born into this chaos." I wanted to be strong for this child, but that night I wasn't strong. I was shattered. I was scared. I was exhausted in a way no nap could fix. I was pregnant, humiliated, and utterly alone. The man I trusted most in this world had looked me in the eyes and lied with conviction. He made me mourn him while he planned his escape. He left me to suffer a loss that wasn't even real. And now, I didn't know who I was anymore. Was I a victim? A fool? A single mother-to-be? All I knew was I wasn't the Claire I used to be. I stopped eating much. Everything made me nauseous. Not because of the pregnancy, but because my body rejected the idea of pleasure, of routine. I didn't cook. I didn't sleep. I stared at the nursery monitor like it was broadcasting answers. I didn't talk to anyone for 3 days. My mom called repeatedly. She'd been distant in recent years. We'd argued over David, ironically. She always something about him rubbed her the wrong way. She said no one was that perfect. I didn't listen to her then. Now I couldn't bring myself to say she was right. I couldn't face the sound of her voice telling me, "I told you so," even if she'd never say it out loud. So I stayed inside, watched the curtains move in the breeze, counted baby kicks, let time pass like syrup. And then came the nightmares. Dreams where David was alive, really dying this time, calling out to me for help, but I was paralyzed. Other nights, I'd see him holding our baby, smiling at Kayla, walking into the ocean while I screamed from the shore. I woke up crying almost every time. It didn't help that I'd become a tabloid fascination. Pregnant wife exposes husband's fake death plot, was apparently a headline made for viral media. Everyone had an opinion, everyone wanted a piece of the story, but none of them knew me. None of them knew what it felt like to watch your future disintegrate overnight. To go from planning a family to wondering how you'll pay rent. To see the man you thought would die in your arms, smirking in a tuxedo beside his mistress. I knew I should feel powerful. I had brought down a liar. I had saved myself and my child from a life built on lies. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, angry, ashamed. Not because of what he did, but because I let it happen. I saw the signs. I ignored the instincts. I believed the story, because believing was easier than confronting the truth. And that shame? It lived in my chest like a storm. By the 5th day, I hit the lowest point. I collapsed in the shower. Physically, I was fine, just a dizzy spell from dehydration and lack of sleep. But emotionally, I was gone. I curled up on the bathroom tiles, water still running, and whispered, it wasn't a cry for help. It was a confession. I didn't feel capable. I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel anything. But somewhere underneath the fog, I heard a tiny sound. Thump. Then again. Thump. The baby. A kick, harder than before. It startled me, pulled me back into the moment. That life inside me, it wasn't just depending on me. It was reminding me I was still here, still breathing, still fighting, even when I didn't want to, even when I thought I couldn't. That kick was a whisper from the future. You're not done. And maybe that's all I needed. Not a grand rescue, not a motivational speech, just one tiny reminder that life wasn't over yet, that I could still rise. Not for David, not for revenge, but for us, me and this baby. We were still standing, barely, but standing. Sometimes, the best weapon is the one you forgot you were holding. 2 weeks after the gala, after the public betrayal, after the meltdown in the nursery, I started to remember who I was before David. Not the grieving wife, not the heartbroken woman everyone saw on the news, but Claire Evans, the girl who built her own business from nothing. The girl who lived in a shoebox apartment at 22 and taught herself Photoshop on a second-hand laptop. The girl who once walked out of a boardroom full of men twice her age because they tried to undercut her rate. That girl? She wasn't gone. She was just buried under lies. And now, she was done hiding. The shift started quietly. I was reviewing paperwork, trying to get ahead of the upcoming legal battles. I had spoken to a lawyer the hospital recommended, a sharp woman named Erica. She was smart, calm, and didn't treat me like a victim. She asked for every piece of documentation I had. While going through the old laptop David had left behind, the same one where I found the life insurance documents, I stumbled onto something I hadn't noticed before, a hidden folder. It was buried 3 levels deep, disguised under the name Travel Receipts. But it wasn't receipts, it was encrypted files. And one of them? It had my name on it. I stared at the screen for a full minute, heart pounding. Then I copied the folder onto a USB drive and sent it to Erica. She had forensic tech skills on call. An hour later, she called me, voice tight. Claire, this is big. You said David worked in finance, right? Yes, I said cautiously. Well, she replied, your husband wasn't just a portfolio manager, he was laundering money. I blinked. Excuse me? For months, maybe longer. Offshore accounts, fake nonprofits, crypto transactions. He was moving serious cash under the radar. And Claire, you're listed as a silent business partner on 2 of the shell companies. My stomach dropped. He forged your signature. I pressed the phone to my ear like that would make it make sense. Why would he do that? To hide assets? To put you on the line in case anything came crashing down. It's smart in a criminal way. If he disappeared and the authorities came knocking, guess whose name they'd find? Mine. My name. Tied to illegal accounts I'd never heard of. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about survival. David hadn't just planned to abandon me. He planned to let me take the fall. But what he didn't know was that I had my own card to play. A year before we got pregnant, David begged me to sign over my share of the house to him. Said it would simplify taxes. I refused. It was the one fight I won. And that decision? It saved me. Because while the accounts were in his name, and the fraud was tied to him, the house where all the files were found, the house he used for laundering meetings, the address on the fake company registrations, was mine. Legally. Entirely. Which meant I had leverage. Erica and I made a plan. We compiled everything, Emails, IP addresses, financial statements, screen recordings. We sent a full package to the FBI and to the state attorney. But we didn't stop there. I called an old friend from college, Rachel, now a respected journalist in investigative crime reporting. She owed me a favor. Within a week, she had a full exposé ready to go. White-collar web of deceit. Pregnant wife uncovers husband's dual life of lies and laundered millions. That was the headline. But before we published, I made one last move. I went to visit David. He was out on bail, confined to a family friend's estate while under investigation. His lawyer had been pushing for house arrest until the hearings began. Apparently, he still thought charm could save him. I walked in without warning. He was on the patio sipping espresso like a man on vacation. He froze when he saw me. "Claire," he said carefully, "you shouldn't be here." "I know," I replied, "but I brought something you should see." I placed the folder of evidence on the table. His face drained of color as he flipped through the pages. The accounts, the offshore transfers, the forged signatures, my name on things I never touched. "This is a joke," he said weakly. "No," I said, "this is justice." He leaned back, trying to act unfazed. "You'll go down with me if this goes public." "No," I said, locking eyes with him. "You used my house, you used my name, but you forgot one thing." "What?" "I'm not afraid of you anymore." He didn't speak, so I continued. "You wanted to disappear? Great. Go ahead, because tomorrow your face will be on every major news outlet in the country, and the FBI, they'll be knocking. You wouldn't." "I already did." I stood. "I said goodbye once, David. This time, I mean it." And I walked away. No tears, no guilt, no fear, just fire. There's a moment, quiet, subtle, when you stop surviving and start becoming. It doesn't come with fireworks or theme music. It comes in the mirror, in the early morning, when your hair's a mess and the bags under your eyes tell stories. It comes in your voice when you say no more, and actually mean it. For me, that moment came 4 weeks after I exposed David. By then, the investigation had taken off. His assets were frozen. The press moved from sympathy stories to criminal breakdowns. The world was no longer talking about the poor pregnant wife. They were talking about the woman who brought down her husband's empire. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a headline. And for once, that didn't terrify me. I embraced it. But before I could truly move forward, I had to strip off every layer of the old Claire. The woman who flinched, the woman who begged, the woman who believed in fairy tales. So, I started with my space. I gutted the house, I sold the bed we shared. I threw out every shirt that still smelled like his cologne. The bathroom cabinet, where his razor used to be, was empty now. I filled it with serums, lotions, and color-coded labels like I was designing a new version of myself. Then came the wardrobe. I donated everything soft and beige and comfortable. The maternity sweaters with stretched-out collars, the oversized cardigans he always said made me look safe. I replaced them with tailored blazers, wrap dresses, bright colors, gold accessories. I didn't wait until after the baby was born to feel powerful again. I was already powerful. I was growing life and rebuilding mine simultaneously. Next, I hired a branding photographer. Yes, branding, because I was taking back my business. Claire Evans' design had been in limbo for too long. I updated the website, rewrote my bio, and posted a blog titled "What Betrayal Taught Me About Boundaries and Business." It went viral. Not because it was about David, but because it was about me. Women from around the country emailed me. I thought I was the only one. "Thank you for saying what I never could. You helped me walk away." I cried reading those messages, not from sadness, but from solidarity. I wasn't alone. None of us were. The makeover wasn't just about appearance. It was about access. Access to the parts of me I'd buried to make a man more comfortable. I signed up for prenatal boxing, not for violence, for power. Every punch was a release, every jab a reminder. I can protect myself and my baby. I met weekly with Erica, my lawyer, who became more than just legal support. She became a lifeline, a reminder that smart, strategic women exist, that I could be one again. One morning, she called with an update. David's deal fell apart. He tried to offer partial restitution. The state declined. They want to pursue charges fully. Good. Let him sit with the consequences. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted accountability. And while David's world burned, mine bloomed. I was invited to speak on a women's empowerment panel. The topic, turning betrayal into breakthrough. I almost declined. Then I remembered how I used to sit in the back of rooms like that, taking notes, wishing for courage. I owed it to that girl to show up. So I did. I stood on stage, baby bump and all, in front of 300 women, and told the truth. I thought losing him would break me, I said. But it introduced me to the strongest version of myself. The room erupted. Afterward, a woman with tears in her eyes hugged me and whispered, "He thought he was writing your ending. But you wrote your beginning." That line stayed with me. It became my mantra. I printed it on a canvas and hung it in the nursery, right above the crib. The same crib I finally finished assembling. Alone, and proudly. The nursery wasn't yellow anymore. I painted it a deep teal, bold, unexpected, rich. I filled it with books, quotes, stories of strong women, not princesses waiting to be rescued, but queens who built empires. I didn't want my child growing up in the shadow of lies. I wanted them to know the truth, that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. And I had risen. Not perfectly, not easily, but completely. I wasn't the same Claire who walked into that hospital thinking she was about to become a widow. I wasn't the woman who walked down the gala steps with her secrets exposed. I wasn't even the woman crying on the nursery floor, apologizing to her unborn child. I was someone else now. Someone new. And the best part? This was just the beginning. Revenge, when it's rooted in rage, burns fast and messy. But when it's rooted in clarity, in control, in power, it doesn't burn at all. It shines. And I didn't want to hurt David the way he hurt me. I wanted to erase the version of me he thought could never rise. That was my revenge. And it began with an email to the board of directors at Northview Medical Center. Subject line: request to present findings, fraud exposure, and systemic failure. It was bold, I knew that. But after the scandal broke, the hospital was desperate to restore its image. And I had something they needed. Answers. I offered to speak at their internal review hearing, to detail exactly how David's plan had gone undetected, and how the hospital's silence nearly cost an innocent woman her freedom and future. They agreed. The room was smaller than the gala hall. No violins, no champagne, just a U-shaped table, stern faces, and polished shoes. David wasn't there, but his legacy hovered like a bad odor. I stood at the podium in a fitted black dress, minimal makeup, and confidence sharper than any blade. "I was 7 months pregnant when your doctors told me my husband was dying," I began, "and I was 8 months pregnant when I found out he wasn't." They shifted in their seats. I pulled up my slides, emails, time-stamped conversations, audio clips, the names of the nurses, the falsified medical forms, every layer of the cover-up. I spoke clearly, no drama, no tears, just facts. Your systems failed, but more than that, your silence enabled fraud. If I had walked out of that hospital without overhearing what I did, I could have been framed for financial crimes I didn't commit. My child could have been born to a mother fighting for her freedom. The room was silent when I finished. Then came the apology. Not just from the hospital, but from the chairman himself. They offered to pay all my legal fees plus restitution. But that wasn't the revenge. That was justice. The revenge came a week later, at a conference, a national finance summit. David's former firm had booked a keynote speaker to discuss fraud prevention in the corporate age. Guess who the speaker was? Me. They didn't just want a victim, they wanted a voice. The story was already public, but hearing it from me, live, direct, with slides and spreadsheets, and the exact details of how a trusted executive faked his own death, that was a different level of exposure. I walked on stage to a standing ovation. Not because I was perfect, but because I had survived. And people don't cheer survival. They cheer comebacks. David's ex-colleagues sat in the front row. I recognized them by their stiff smiles and expensive watches. They used to greet me with fake warmth at company dinners. Now they couldn't even look me in the eye. I told the audience how David rerouted money through shell corporations, how he used my name, how he tried to make me disappear with him. I ended my speech with a quote. Not from a scholar, from myself. Never assume the woman beside you doesn't know what's happening. Sometimes she's just watching, gathering, waiting for the moment when she turns the table and builds a bigger one. The room exploded. Cameras, articles, interviews. I didn't hide. I went on a podcast. I went on live TV. Not for attention. For every woman who had been gaslit into silence. For every pregnant wife sitting beside a liar in a hospital bed. for every single mother who was told she wasn't strong enough to rebuild. David tried to disappear. I made sure the world would never forget his name. The final blow came when the sentencing was announced. David pled guilty to wire fraud, falsifying medical records, and attempted insurance fraud. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, with no parole for the first 3. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to. But I did send a letter, not to him, to the judge. It outlined how his actions had endangered me and my unborn child, how he manipulated medical institutions, how he weaponized illness and trust. The judge read part of it aloud in court, and when the gavel struck, it wasn't just David who lost his freedom. It was the end of a version of me that had been caged in silence for far too long. I walked through those months like fire on legs. I kept my business growing. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Harper Rose. She came into this world with her eyes wide open, just like her mother. The day the prison van took David away, I stood at my front door holding Harper in my arms. We didn't wave. We didn't flinch. We just watched. Because that's what survivors do. They don't seek revenge to destroy. They rise to reclaim. And the higher I rose, the smaller he became. If you had told me a year ago that I would be standing here alone, empowered, and unbroken, I would have laughed or cried. Probably both, because back then I didn't believe in endings without loss. I didn't believe in strength without someone else to lean on. I didn't believe in me. But now, I know that power doesn't always come from grand victories. Sometimes it comes from survival. Sometimes it comes from choosing yourself, even when no one else does. Especially then. The truth is, I never wanted to be a symbol. I didn't ask to be a headline or a warning or a lesson in betrayal. I just wanted to be a good wife, a mother, a woman with a future that looked the way I planned. But life has a way of rewriting your script in real time. What David did to me, what he almost got away with, wasn't just about lies. It was about stripping me of identity, of safety, of voice. And I could have let that define me. I could have stayed small, quiet, scared. But I didn't. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped asking, why me? And I started asking, what now? That one shift changed everything. It reminded me that I'm not a product of what happened to me. I'm a product of what I chose to do after. I chose to speak, to fight, to expose, to rise. And now I live differently. I live loudly. I laugh without apology. I cry without shame. I say no without explaining, and yes without permission. My daughter Harper will grow up knowing exactly who her mother is. Not just the woman who changed her diapers and made her lunches, but the woman who chose to build a life out of rubble, brick by brick. She will know that strength isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the hard questions and staying in the room when the truth gets ugly. She'll know that love is not supposed to hurt or hide. She'll know that respect doesn't come in silence and loyalty doesn't come with lies. And she'll know that women, no matter how broken they feel, are never truly helpless. Because here's the real truth. You can lose everything you thought you needed, your marriage, your plans, your illusions, and still find something better. You can lose the man who swore to protect you and become the woman who protects herself. You can be pregnant, terrified, betrayed, and still walk into a courtroom with your head high and your evidence ready. You can walk away from someone who tried to bury you and build a garden on the very ground they thought would be your grave. And it won't be easy. There will be days you'll want to give up. Nights where silence feels louder than screams. Mornings where you'll wake up and forget who you are for a second. But then something will remind you. A kick, a whisper, a mirror, and you'll remember. You're still here, still breathing, still becoming. That's the most dangerous thing about a woman who's been broken and rebuilt. She remembers every crack, every scar, every silence, and she learns how to turn all of it into armor. I wear mine now, not to shut the world out, but to keep my worth in. I no longer explain myself to people who wouldn't listen anyway. I no longer water myself down to fit inside the version of womanhood that pleases men like David. I am soft and sharp, gentle and unshakable. I am everything I was never allowed to be when I lived in someone else's shadow. So if you're watching this, or reading this, or sitting alone in your car trying to hold it together, this is your sign. You don't have to wait for someone to save you. You are the rescue. Your truth matters. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And if someone made you believe you were crazy, dramatic, difficult, or too much, let me tell you something. You are exactly enough. You are not disposable. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not responsible for the choices someone else made to harm you. But you are responsible for what you do next. And you can do anything. I started this journey thinking I had lost everything. Now I know. I only lost what was never truly mine. And I gained something so much bigger, myself. So this is where my story ends. Not in heartbreak, not in revenge, but in freedom, in fire. In the quiet confidence of a woman who walked through the worst and didn't just survive, she thrived. And to the Davids of the world, you can't kill what you never truly saw. We're done hiding, we're done shrinking, we're done waiting. This is our time, and we're not asking for it, we're taking it.